And you can see how it just collapses after it's hit there, almost in slow motion there. Wow, it's incredible to see.
Most definitely incredible.
I have to say, though, if you take a look at that video, it is truly a gripping type of video. Even some of the media here are just so shocked to be looking at that.
It's hard to believe something when you see it on a video, but when you see it for real, okay, then you know it's reality.
The first thing I noticed when the sun started to go up is just over to the side of that, you can see the ramp where that was leading to the bridge, and you can see there's no more bridge there. It's just heartbreaking. You can see just where it ends. You can see what's left of the Key Bridge. At least we've got daylight now.
We will get through this because that is the Maryland spirit, and that's what Maryland is made of. We are Maryland tough, and we are Baltimore strong.
Tonight, a WJZ News special, The Key Bridge, 1 year later.
Welcome to this WJZ special, The Key Bridge, 1 year later. I'm Denise Koch. It was 1 year ago today that the magnificent Francis Scott Key Bridge, the gateway to Baltimore for almost half a century, was struck by an enormous cargo ship and sent plunging into the Patapsco River below. Also, 8 men who were working on the bridge at the time, 6 of them did not survive. It is a moment in time that many of us will never forget. Many of you, I imagine, will never forget. Tonight, we will pay homage to those men who lost their lives. We will also look back on the bridge and look forward to what may come. We have a team of reporters around the area, team coverage, but we're going to begin with Mike Helgren, who is live for us in Fort Armstead. Mike?
Denise, it is a chilly, windy day here along the Patapsco, just as it was 1 year ago. And we all have our own memories of that unforgettable day. The disbelief that the bridge was gone, the grief over those who lost their lives, and the relief that more lives were not lost in this tragedy. We are still waiting for the NTSB investigation into why the dolly lost power, blacking out several times and slamming into the bridge. There's also an open FBI criminal investigation. Here now is a look at that tragic day and the major developments over the past year. For 47 years, the Francis Scott Key Bridge stood as the gateway to the port and a landmark for Baltimore, one of the longest steel truss bridges in the world. Until it collapsed in seconds, just before 1:30 in the morning on March 26, 2024.
Is that the Key Bridge that collapsed?
The Dolly, a cargo ship bound for Sri Lanka, lost power and crashed into one of the main support piers, sending members of a construction crew filling potholes on the bridge into the frigid Patapsco River.
You would have stopped them from going to work if you had known.
So they're in the water, but they haven't got him out of the water yet.
Only one survived. He clung to a piece of steel in the water after escaping his work truck.
He was able to roll down the window and escape. You can imagine how frightening that is.
Body camera video shows him miraculously walking to safety after his rescue.
I mean, that guy looked like he was all right, but it's cold.
He was shaking up pretty good.
That's a long fall.
In the light of day, it was hard to comprehend what happened. Brian Retz with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. What was in your mind when you first saw all the debris and were out there and could see close up what had happened?
The video and pictures that you saw didn't do anything justice for it. You had to really physically see it. And you just were in awe of it because it didn't look real, but it was real.
From the water, you can see some of the mangled steel and concrete that remain in the Patapsco River. It's going to be a huge job to get all of that out. But crews wasted no time, developing a plan to map out and remove thousands of tons of debris and carefully retrieve the bodies of the victims. A dangerous job in the murky water.
Just a couple inches beyond my fingertips.
There's a lot of debris, there's rebar, there's concrete. And a lot of the times for our first dives, we don't know what dangers are down there.
Then Unified Command, made up of multiple state and federal agencies, prioritized opening the channel, clearing the steel and asphalt piece by piece to
get the Port of Baltimore open again.
And when we started pulling up these pieces, they were enormous, some 50, 80 feet long of wreckage that was still tied together and mangled. So we knew that there are steel members below the mudline that we have to continue to pull out.
This is the largest piece of debris from what was the Key Bridge, the steel that had stood there since 1977. It will soon be part of a memorial at Fort McHenry.
For weeks, the dolly sat in the Patapsco, the lanes of the bridge draped across it, the crew forced to stay on board.
We were able to purchase SIM cards and get them out to them within the first few days. That way they can maintain contact with family back home and assure family and loved ones that they were okay.
It would be 2 months before controlled explosions removed the largest pieces of the bridge from the ship, and yet another month before the dolly left Baltimore. It's since been refurbished and is back on the water in China, but some of the crew members remain in Baltimore in legal limbo.
The monotony of just sitting can wear on you, so that's kind of why we're trying to do baseball games and trips here and there, just to keep them from becoming bored and then starting to ruminate on the incident and have that affect their mental health.
Lawsuit after lawsuit is on a slow march through the courts.
This, of course, may be the most expensive maritime case in the history of the world,
including a federal claim seeking more than $100 million, saying the tragedy was entirely avoidable and blaming cheap, quick fixes to the ship's electrical system. All while the dolly's owners try to limit their liability to a fraction of that, and the NTSB continues its investigation into what went wrong.
So there's no excuse.
Last week, the agency released an eye-opening report blaming the state for failing to conduct a recommended assessment that would have shown the bridge was vulnerable to a strike. Federal investigators found the chances of a vessel striking the Key Bridge were 30 times the recommended threshold, and the Chesapeake Bay Bridge is at risk too.
We asked, had you done this vulnerability assessment on the Key Bridge? The answer was no. We then asked, are you doing this vulnerability assessment on the Chesapeake Bay Bridge? The answer is no.
There's not a bridge in this country that could have taken that kind of impact. And so we are going to make sure we're cooperating with the NTSB to get all the assessments done. But also, I'm going to make sure that those reckless operators are held to account for the tragedy that happened to our state.
Soon, a new bridge will rise over the Patapsco. The memories of Baltimore's landmark have not faded, along with the pain of the families who lost their loved ones that fateful day.
I feel bad. Only God knows how hard my heart aches. Maybe he was desperate, trying to escape.
It took mere seconds to bring down the Key Bridge, changing lives, changing our city forever.
You want to see the new bridge come up, and you want to see things get back to normal, although it really won't in certain ways, especially for those that had loved ones lost. And it will change the landscape of Baltimore forever.
It certainly will. Traffic at the Port of Baltimore has since rebounded, and it's having one of its best years ever in terms of cargo volume. The NTSB's full investigation into the dolly should be released in the fall, and the new bridge will cost close to $2 billion. We'll have more on that ahead. Denise?
All right, terrific report. Thank you so much, Mike. Well, the bridge was built in 1977, and although it took an army of people, of course, to erect it, it also had to be maintained. And as we have heard, the construction workers who were lost were on the bridge in the dark of the early morning hours, filling potholes, making repairs when it was struck by the dolly. It was a heartbreaking days of waiting for those families with the hope that maybe those men might have survived. Alexis Davila sat with a pastor who spent those hours with those families as they prayed and hoped that their loved ones might be saved.
On that early, dark, cold morning, 8 workers were filling potholes on the Francis Scott Key Bridge. But their routine day on the job turned into tragedy. When the dolly crashed into the bridge, the entire crew fell into the Patapsco River. 2 men survived, but the other 6 plunged to their deaths. Hours after the collapse, Padre Ako Walker was called to speak to the victims' families.
The room was just filled with sadness. People were crying, people were uncertain, and you could have seen the pain etched on their faces. When I was leaving, that mother asked me to pray for her son.
That mother was to Alejandro Hernandez Fuentes, the first recovered victim. She asked Walker to do something he had never done before, to go to the morgue.
So I accompanied the family, and it was painful.
The pain grew beyond Baltimore as the world heard more victims' families cry out. The only thing I would always love is for people to know that my husband is a hero to me. In an exclusive interview just 2 days after the tragedy, I spoke to the wife of Jose Lopez. They are sad. They loved Jose. He had a good heart. He was a hard worker. He was always worried about his family too. He died, but he was fighting for us always. Franco endured the longest wait as her husband's body was recovered in May. He was the final victim pulled from the river. Some of the other victims' families tell Walker that they want the community to remember their loved ones as not just immigrants.
That they come here looking for a better life. And so they don't want to be considered inferior. And so the bridge is going to be rebuilt, but I also think that, as an image, we should be building bridges with one another.
Alexis Davila, on your corner for WJZ.
Beautifully said, Alexis, and beautifully said, Pastor. These families will be grieving the rest of their lives. Now, we have a statement this week from the families and the two survivors. Their attorneys say, and I'm quoting here, while nothing can bring the men who died that night back to their families, we will do everything in our power to hold the Dali's owners and operators accountable for their role in this disaster. May we remember the names of those brave men and never forget the sacrifice of our construction workers.
Still to come.
I was awake at about 1 o'clock that morning, laying there trying to go back to sleep, and heard what I initially thought was thunder.
A roar in the middle of the night becomes a call to action. The ministry now serving the members of the Dali cargo ship, still stuck in Baltimore. And later,
my dad and I used to crab and fish out here.
It was the video shown around the world. We hear from the man behind the camera that captured the moments the Key Bridge fell. What Mike Singer shares he hopes that same camera will capture next. This is the Key Bridge, 1 year later, on WJZ and CBS News Baltimore.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Rick Ritter, live in Southeast Baltimore tonight in Brewers Hill at the National on the rooftop with what once used to be the Key Bridge off into the distance behind me. And I come to realize today that when you look out there, that eerie feeling that you get knowing it once stood there is something that we'll never be able to shake. The emotions we felt 1 year ago are something we'll never forget. And the pain for many of these families who were impacted by this tragedy is something they will carry with them forever. The Dali cargo ship was off into the distance behind me for 2 months after that tragedy before it was moved back to the port of Baltimore. It was another month after that when it finally left to go back to Sri Lanka. But even though it left, 11 of its crew members remained here. And here they are a year later, still in Baltimore. There is a lengthy legal process that needs to play out. And with that come local organizations who are stepping up, trying to be there for them as they are thousands and thousands of miles away from their family. I want to pull in Janae Reese now because this is her angle of the story. Janae, you had a chance to speak to the Apostleship of the Sea, which is a group, one of the many that are assisting these 11 crew members during this time.
Yeah, and they are basically making sure they know that they are not alone, because this tragedy is being felt across the world. Even the families of those 11 workers that are still here in Baltimore, those helping them out, had a chance to share more about exactly what they're doing. We spoke with Andrew Middleton, and here's what he had to say. Andrew Middleton's mission is to help others. He's the director of the Archdiocese of Baltimore's volunteer ministry, Apostleship of the Seas.
We try to be a welcoming and friendly face in the Port of Baltimore for the seafarers that call on the ships that come in.
Middleton's team helps seafarers from all over the world.
It's a hard life. It's months away from home.
But on March 26, 2024, Middleton says he couldn't sleep on what was supposed to be a normal night.
I was awake at about 1 o'clock that morning, laying there trying to go back to sleep, and heard what I initially thought was thunder.
This roaring sound he heard was the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge.
I ran into the living room and turned on the TV, and they were reporting that the Key Bridge had collapsed after it had been collided with by the dolly.
After the shock wore off, Middleton says the name of the ship sounded familiar.
I realized that we had provided transportation for the crew on the Sunday and Monday prior to their sailing.
He immediately called the crew, hoping they were okay.
And at that point, I kind of decided that I guess I should get dressed and go to work.
What he didn't know was that his work with the 21 people on board the ship was just beginning.
Because it wasn't only the dolly at that point that we were serving. It was the 7 other vessels that were stuck here for weeks.
A year later, Middleton says they're still assisting the crew who's in Baltimore as the investigation into the collapse continues. They've done so by providing religious services and vital supplies like SIM cards so the crew can stay in touch with their family.
I tell them constantly, feel free to reach out if you need something. If you need to go to the grocery store or the doctor or shopping.
Middleton says the crew keeps the victims of the collapse on their minds often.
One of the crew members asked if he could see the list so that he could pray for those gentlemen and their families.
Because this tragedy still aches.
I think it's important to remember that those lives were lost and those families' lives are forever changed. We need to pray for them and always remember them.
And Rick, we do want to be clear with everyone at home that they are not prisoners. They were requested to stay here by authorities, and they will at least be here until the fall when the NTSB comes out with their final report later on this year.
So many organizations stepping up during a time of need. Baltimore comes together better than any other city in the entire country, and this state stepping up with so many, helping raise millions of dollars for those impacted by the tragedy, and that includes the United Way of Maryland.
It was a morning that I'll never forget.
Did you think in the beginning that some of these men might have survived?
Governor Moore reflects back on the moment he received the unimaginable call that the Francis Scott Key Bridge had been hit. His emotional first response once he arrived on the scene. This is the Key Bridge 1 year later on WJZ and CBS News Baltimore.
Welcome back. Well, a year ago on this date, the 63rd governor of Maryland, Governor Wes Moore, had just celebrated a year on the job, his first year on the job. He went to bed that night not knowing what was lying ahead. 2:02 in the morning, he tells me. His chief of staff called him and said, "Governor, I have some bad news. The Key Bridge is gone." The governor says he was confused. He didn't believe that the iconic Baltimore Gateway literally was no more. And during an exclusive sit-down, he tells me that he struggled holding on to hope when he arrived on the scene, holding on to hope.
It was a morning that I'll never forget.
Did you think in the beginning that some of these men might have survived?
I think the more details that we got, when I realized that the bridge is 180 feet over the water. At first we didn't know how many people. And I keep on thinking about those first responders who just saved countless lives by just closing off the bridge. and who moved without instructions, but just thought this was the right thing to do. Let me just make sure that we're doing this. Because remember, after the bridge was gone, it was dark. Cars are driving 65 miles an hour. So cars just would have kept on coming without even realizing the bridge was gone. So, I remember praying that morning, praying for their safety, praying for the divers that we could save as many people as possible. But at that point, we still had no idea how many people that we were talking about. And just thinking about what it was like for those individuals to go 180 feet into cold, frigid, and dark waters with debris falling all around you, and just thanking God for those first responders who were there to do everything they could do to bring them back.
Thank the first responders, and imagine that nightmare. What a nightmare it would have been. You'll remember in the wake of that, the governor, very visible, coined the phrase Maryland tough, Baltimore strong, that we heard over and over again. And now, as we look back, we know why. The governor has participated in a number of ceremonies honoring those men who died, including one that was just yesterday. And also at that event was Baltimore City Mayor Brandon Scott. And for more on that ceremony, Nikki Zizaza has that for us. Nikki.
Well, Denise, Governor Moore and Mayor Scott hosted a special wreath-laying ceremony earlier this week. WJZ was a part of the small group of selected media invited to that ceremony. Both leaders said they just wanted to show the victims' families they're still there with them, standing with them on the boat, knowing the pain from that day a year ago, and can still feel it like it just happened yesterday. I spoke with Mayor Scott earlier tonight, and he told me these families will continue to be the main priority even as a new bridge is soon to be built.
6 people lost their lives. 6 families had their lives disrupted and changed forever. That is always going to be the largest takeaway from this, is that people who were working hard every day to make all of our lives better, including mine as someone who frequently went over the bridge, lost their life because of this tragedy. And so you never forget that. But when you look back at it now, a year out, you also think about how people came together. And I think the thing that I always take is that from those very moments on that shore, before the sun came up, everybody from the governor's team, my team, all the local governments, the federal government, from the President of the United States on down to the Coast Guard, everyone was working together as one.
The mayor says unity in the midst of tragedy is how these families and our communities will continue to heal.
The man behind the camera.
Not necessarily the kind of thing that you want to be famous for.
Mike Singer shares what he's been up to since this camera live streamed the fall of the gateway to Baltimore. Plus,
what made the Key Bridge so vulnerable?
Looking back with a new bridge on the horizon, WJZ investigator Mike Helgren asks engineering experts the risk factors now being considered with construction on the new Francis Scott Key Bridge, set to begin in the fall. This is the Key Bridge, 1 year later, on WJZ and CBS News Baltimore.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Rick Ritter, live in Southeast Baltimore tonight, where our coverage continues. We all remember where we were exactly 12 months ago, and we all remember where we were when we saw some of those first images of the Key Bridge coming to tumble down. And there was one man specifically, one video specifically, that stunned millions of people all around the world. And I want to pull up that video right now. You know exactly what we're talking about. This live stream video, the Dali cargo ship strikes the bridge, and then within seconds, it comes crumbling down into the water. This with 8 construction workers who were on top of that bridge at the time. I want to pull in Dennis Valera now, live on your corner in Pasadena tonight. Dennis, Mike Singer is the man who helped set up this live stream camera, and he never thought this would be the way that people found out about one of the worst disasters we have ever seen.
Yeah, Rick, you're exactly right. This camera, I'm actually standing right in front of it right now. He just uses it to watch ships coming in and out of the port. He never thought he'd catch a tragedy like this.
The gap where the Key Bridge once stood is an eerie sight for Mike Singer.
I mean, my dad and I used to crab and fish out here.
It's hard for him to believe it's already been a year since the collapse. The video showing the whole event went global, all because of this camera, perched on one of his friends' house. Singer set it up in partnership with a live stream company. It became a go-to view for the Port of Baltimore, especially for those part of the Baltimore and Chesapeake Bay Ship Watchers, a group he founded.
We were just kind of watching the ships kind of come and go, all the different types of ships that come and go here from the port until that fateful day.
Singer did not realize what happened last year until hours after the fact, and he saw the camera stream, going viral.
It's not necessarily the kind of thing that you want to be famous for.
Singer's recently been honored by the Maryland General Assembly, calling his footage instrumental to the investigation surrounding the collapse. Singer says that is a benefit to catching the tragedy.
When did the ship turn? When did the generators kick back on and belt some more smoke? When did the lights go out twice? Just imagine what it would like if it wasn't there. We'd have 50 more questions than we have today.
Since the collapse, Singer says communities have grown on the live stream, his Ship Watchers group. He's even started a podcast about the port. But amid all of that, the camera has been catching the cleanup as well as the starting processes for what will be the new Key Bridge.
So Mike, I asked you this last year, how it felt that the camera caught the end of the former Key Bridge, but now it's going to catch the beginnings of the new one. How does that feel?
It feels really exciting, to be able to just watch them build it and watch the entire process. It's going to be an incredible thing to watch.
Now, Mike Singer also tells me he hopes to create some kind of time lapse to show the rebuild of the new Key Bridge. Rick, back to you.
And Dennis, one of the things he mentioned, we'd have so many more questions if we didn't have that video. That video right there, again, the video that has been seen by millions and millions of people all around the world, crucial in this investigation that continues to play out.
After the break,
we did see about a 25 to 30% loss.
You don't realize how many people use the bridge until that happens. So we definitely felt it instantly.
Staying afloat during uncertainty. The stories of small businesses remaining resilient after a year of lower foot traffic. And
it was our highest calling at that point in time.
Clearing the Channel and the Port of Baltimore. How one logistics center answered the call to action in the wake of tragedy. This is the Key Bridge 1 year later on WJZ and CBS News Baltimore.
Welcome back. The Key Bridge, of course, was an economic engine for the area. One side is Baltimore County, the other side, Anne Arundel County. 30,000 cars, vehicles of all kinds went across it every day. When it went down, it really impacted commerce. We have team coverage. Casey Baylor talks about a logistics hub trying to get businesses going back. But first, Tara Lynch also has the story of small businesses impacted, ones you might not think of, that really saw an economic toll when that bridge went down. Tara.
Well, Denise, these local businesses really felt the impact when that bridge collapsed, which of course squeezed their bottom lines. Layoffs, cutbacks, even closing down were all on the table. But in the midst of chaos, creativity prevailed and a fighting spirit to stay afloat.
Total disbelief.
Very eerie.
Inconvenience and shock. The overwhelming feeling of where are we going from here?
Uncertainty loomed 1 year ago for restaurants, truck drivers, and port workers who relied on the Francis Scott Key Bridge. The Boulevard Diner sits just miles from the Port of Baltimore and where the bridge once stood tall.
The immediate aftermath, I would say, was busier than normal. I think a lot of people were coming from out of the area to see the damage themselves, maybe take pictures.
But then, the tables weren't full.
We did see about a 25 to 30% loss. And that pretty much lasted all the way through until the holidays, I would say.
You don't realize how many people use the bridge until that happens. So we definitely felt it instantly.
The Boulevard Diner and Vinny's Cafe have very different menus, but they share a customer base who was dining elsewhere because traffic was building and they couldn't easily get to Dundalk without the bridge.
Today, we saw a customer that we hadn't seen in a long time. And he just told us, he's like, the bridge.
In the blink of an eye, your whole life could change. And for a lot of people, it did, hon.
Karen Hughes-Rapinski is a regular at the Boulevard Diner, going for lunch with her cousin while working at the port. But those lunches stopped when the bridge fell.
The uncertainty of it was like mind-boggling. Like it's very difficult every day not to know what tonight could bring or tomorrow.
When they came back to their old haunt,
it was good. It was very good. Yes, we were happy. They missed us too, I think.
I've been in the business for 47 years. 2024 was it. Most difficult for sure.
Truck drivers rely on the port, and with the Baltimore-bound ships docking in other cities, drivers had to quickly find a way to keep moving forward.
Finding the containers and then getting the rates in place and everything and getting the movement done. We literally had to do all of that within 48 hours.
Atlantic Nationwide Trucking changed its business model, finding ways to compete in other port cities while serving customers in the Baltimore region.
We shifted from being a trucker that was local to a more over-the-road trucker. And we went to these facilities with as many as 20 trucks a day.
No matter the business, the countdown to a new bridge begins, one that brings not only physical connection, but also an economic engine for Baltimore's own.
I can't wait for it to reopen, just to have that image back for us.
It would be amazing to try to get the bridge back as fast as possible, and that way we can keep the community going.
When it comes back up, I hope everything goes back to normal, and if anything, we gain more business, not just us, but everyone around here.
And this tough industrial side of Baltimore is still working together to make sure that they're building back stronger. And speaking with all of these different businesses, you wouldn't think they have that in common, but everyone here in Dundalk is working together. I do want to send it to the other side of the bridge to Fort Armistead. That's where we find Casey Baylor. And Casey, you spoke with a lot of other businesses. It wasn't just these small mom and pop shops that felt that impact.
Yeah, Tara, just like you, spoke with the owner of Bulls Trucking Company out of Dundalk, who has several trucks carrying 2 to 3 containers in and out of the Port of Baltimore. But when that port temporarily shut down, he says business didn't just slow down for him, it quickly stopped for weeks. The Port of Baltimore is known as one of the busiest ports in the nation. Kevin Bull with Bulls Trucking Company Incorporated can attest to day-to-day traffic flow coming in and out of the port.
Before the Key Bridge collapsed, we were seeing volumes of 2,000 to 3,000 or 4,000 trucks per day.
Port operations came to a screeching halt, but his first concern that morning dealt with the safety of his truck drivers out on the road. He says his business didn't feel any impacts until the next day.
We were sitting in the office and the phones are dead quiet, and we're talking amongst ourselves and we're like, what are we going to do?
Bull says his trucking business started moving again when freight and cargo operations moved to other cities like Philadelphia and Norfolk. He says it took about 2 weeks to put his drivers back on the road. In the meantime, city and state leaders worked to clear out the channel filled with debris from the bridge collapse.
I think we were shocked, like so many within Maryland, that this iconic bridge was no more.
Carrie Doyle is the managing director for Trade Point Atlantic, a logistics center near the Key Bridge. Doyle says on the day of the collapse, his team helped rescue workers refuel their vessels at Trade Point's site. Days later, their assistance stretched even further as they accepted diverted cargo ships and helped remove bridge pieces from the water.
It was our highest calling at that point in time.
Doyle says it took about 48 hours to clear a 10-acre facility on Trade Point's property, which they used to hold mangled metal. Even though the Key Bridge is down for now, Bull says high volumes have returned to the port, but he notes a few impacts that could last for a while.
A lot of our hazmat containers or freight in general, we have to go either through the city or go around 695, which really puts a burden on the traffic, the local traffic, as well as the freight rates, because we have to charge more because we have to go more.
Doyle says Trade Point sees these challenges. He says the company will have a hand in bridge reconstruction. More importantly, they hope a new project will aid in building a resilient port.
We're undertaking $1 billion investment into Sparrows Point Container Terminal to create a second container terminal within the Port of Baltimore.
I think in this area specifically, we will be booming in the next 10 years, more so than we already are now.
And Doyle says the port closure did put an impact on Trade Point Atlantic projects, but he says they weren't concerned about those setbacks. Their main priority was getting the port reopened. Denise.
That's everybody's priority. Thank you so much, Casey and Tara, and we'll be right back. Stay with us.
That morning of Tuesday, March 26th, 1 year ago, the collapse not only separated two ends of the Baltimore region, but it also left many people stranded to find an alternate route, prolonging their travels for hours. WJZ's First Alert traffic anchor, Angela Foster, reflects back to working quickly that day to find alternate routes for many of you at home.
We forget sometimes that we are human beings who are actually reporting what's going on. So we had to, of course, get past the personal feelings, the very somber, hopeless feeling of hearing such news, knowing that we had lost some of our local citizens during that tragedy. So the mood in here was very somber.
Angela says with the bridge gone, trucks carrying goods and services are now taking much longer to make their deliveries. And if you travel during the morning rush hour, you may have noticed that commute doubles in time. Rush hour in the Baltimore area used to end around 8:50. Angela says rush hour now ends around 10 a.m. After the break, Mike Helgren has a look at the future of the Francis Scott Key Bridge.
Welcome back on this somber and solemn anniversary. In just weeks, the rest of the Key Bridge will be demolished, and 3 years from now, the hope is the new bridge will be almost complete. Here's a look at where we're going. The last time construction began on the Francis Scott Key Bridge was in 1972. The original steel truss design spanned 1,209 feet across the Patapsco River and formed the final link in the Beltway. Soon, a new bridge will rise in its place, this time with cables, with 230 feet of clearance, almost double the height, and twice as long as the Federal Channel. The space between the main supports would fit 4.5 football fields. That conforms to modern safety standards, reducing the chance of another crash and collapse.
The vessels that are crossing under these bridges are much bigger than they were when the bridges were constructed.
What made the Key Bridge so vulnerable?
You could think about the piers of the bridge as being a little bit like the legs of a table, right? And if you take out those legs, one side of them, that table is going to come down.
A new report by engineers at Johns Hopkins University finds bridges across the country are susceptible to a catastrophic collision, many likely to be hit within our lifetimes. And the Key Bridge would have been in the top 10 most vulnerable in the country.
We have, for a long time, underestimated the risk to existing bridges around the United States. And in fact, what we saw with the Key Bridge was not an aberration. It was consistent with historical precedent.
A CBS News investigation found fewer than half of the nation's bridges have functional pier protection. Some older bridges, like the nearby Delaware Memorial Bridge, are getting retrofitted. That price tag is more than $90 million.
But how expensive can it be to add extra protections to some of these older bridges?
Well, I can tell you it's a lot less expensive than a new bridge.
The replacement Key Bridge will cost close to $2 billion. In December, Congress agreed to fully fund it after months of debate. Money recovered from the Dolly's owners is supposed to help repay it.
We have been there for other states during their times of need, and we really hope every state represented in the Senate will be with us right now.
How do we bring back a sense of normalcy while maintaining respect for those that were impacted?
Dory Murphy is the Chief of Emergency Management for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which recently issued permits for the new bridge.
1 year after, we're already moving forward with the replacements. I think that's a huge milestone. I think going into the 1 year anniversary, just remembering how fragile life is, how fragile infrastructure is.
Many here could never imagine Baltimore without the Key Bridge, and the tragedy left a hole in the fabric of communities surrounding the Patapsco. Their hearts also heavy from the loss of the 6 men who died.
It's sad. It's pretty sad. It seems like every time I think about this, it seems like I'm about to cry.
Construction will begin in the fall. The old supports will be removed, and the new bridge is expected to open in 2028. Long a site of inspiration, as this spot was for Francis Scott Key himself when he wrote the Star-Spangled Banner after seeing the American flag rise over Fort McHenry. Bigger, stronger, a symbol of Baltimore's resilience. And more than 100 engineers are currently working on that new bridge. Its expected lifespan is 100 years. We know there is a long road to recovery, but our community is up to the challenge, Denise.
I absolutely agree. Thank you very much, Mike. And you can count on WJZ to bring you all the updates along that long road ahead. To the 6 men who died and to their families, our hearts are with you. We will honor you. We will not forget. And to our community, we will rebuild. For Mike Helgren and Nikki Zizaza and Rick Ritter and everyone at WJZ, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We hope you have a good night.